But anyway, I just wanted to kind of share some testimonies to inspire you in your journey with the Lord, uh, and I pray that you would that your faith would be activated in this time. Um, so a little bit about my background. Like we said, we're hillbillies. We are just grew up in North Carolina, farm world. My dad's a furniture maker, and we grew up in the furniture business. And so part of me was kind of a lot of craftsmanship, a lot of kind of making stuff, and then the other side of me is a musician. And so I was always interested in both of those. And when I was 20, the day after I turned 21 years old, I flew to Israel to work on an art project called the Fountain of Tears, which is a memorial site for the Holocaust, but it reflects the suffering of Jesus and the suffering of the Holocaust. So it's a beautiful sculpture garden that you can walk through. And I went over there because I was asked to help work on this art project and help finish it up. And I thought it was going to be 2 months there, and it turned into 9 months. And during that time, I was seeking the Lord, just, 21 years old, what do I do in my life kind of thing. And I was actually in the middle of my work one day, just literally grinding bronze. I mean, it was just a glorious work, just grinding bronze, and bronze dust was all over me. And as I was just kind of in the middle of that, focused on this piece of art in front of me, I felt the manifest presence of God in the room. Like, it actually just kind of overcame me, and so much so that I couldn't even work anymore. And so I just stopped my work, and I was like, whoa, like what's going on here? And all of a sudden, I kind of stepped to the side, and I could just feel the presence of Jesus all over me. And the Lord spoke to me in that moment. It was not an audible voice. It was kind of like a voice in my head. The Lord I could hear his voice speaking to me. It wasn't my voice, and I knew that because what he said was kind of wild. He said, Caleb, you're going to go to some islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And that was it. And I was like, what? Like, okay. So I actually opened up a map of the Pacific, and I could see all these little tiny dots in the the Pacific Ocean, which before I just thought the only inhabited islands in the Pacific were like Hawaii and Fiji. Like, that's what I thought. Like, that's the only thing I could think of. But I saw these tiny little dots called the Gilbert Islands. And I had never heard of those islands before, but when I read that, it was like as if those islands like jumped off off the map at me. And I just knew that those were the islands. And then a series of things from that day on, like I yielded myself to the Lord, and I said, okay, whatever that means, whatever that looks like, I'm all in. And I ended up selling everything I had, gave up everything I had, left my family, and just flew out there. And ended up landing on this little island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And I actually asked one of my buddies, his name was Joel, and I asked him to come with me. He also sold everything he had. And because we read the Bible, and it says, Jesus' missionary framework was go in twos, go in twos, go 2 by 2. So my friend Joel and I, we went together, and we got there on this island, landed, Yeah, we actually were coming down with the plane on the airstrip, and we saw little pigs running on the airstrip. They got out of the way just as we landed. And we got out of the flight, and we, really hot and humid gust of air just kind of like hit us like walking into a wall. And we were like, wow, okay, here we are. And all these people were just in these Pacific Islands, they're all hugging each other, like family reunion and everything, and they all kind of leave, and then the kind of dust of hot, dry air kind of falls, and then Joel and I are just sort of standing on the side of the road. And we're like, all right, we don't know where we're staying tonight. We don't know anyone from this country. But here we are. And then 2 people came up to us, and they had a sheet of paper. These 2 Pacific Islanders came up, and they said, hello, is your name this person and this person? And we said, no, that's not us. And they said, oh, well, we were told that there were supposed to be 2 young men, and they have the exact same description on this sheet of paper as you. And they were supposed to get off the airplane, but they never got off. And they said, we've already prepared a place for them. And they said, since they're not off, we have not been able to find them. We have this place if you want to stay. And Joel and I kind of stepped to the side. We're like, this is the biggest scam ever. But this is all we got. And we were like, Lord, what do we do? And then we actually felt the pleasure of the Lord in that moment. You just feel like you feel the Lord on it. And so we walked back up to them and we said, okay. And that day started this crazy journey. And so since then, we've been living with tribal groups in the Pacific Islands and Southeast Asia. The Lord has birthed a deep desire in our hearts to reach the unreached people groups. And I'm here to tell you there are still many unreached people groups in the 1040 window. And that is our heart. And we have seen whole villages of like thousands of people come to know Jesus in a day. We've seen, young tribal kids who have never heard the name of Jesus that have given their lives to Jesus, and we've helped them go through schooling and become graduates, and then, go back to their tribe and bless their tribes. And so we've been doing that for 15 years now. I'm 36 years old, and that's kind of our life and journey. And now we're in a very cool season because we have moved back to the States, and we have about 25 indigenous missionaries who have a passion to reach their own tribes and their own people. And so what we do from here is we help to support them and back them up, emotionally, financially, like wisdom-wise, giving some advice and here and there, but they are running it. They're actually going out and doing the mission. So that's really awesome. Cool. These are indigenous men and women who are just passionate for Jesus. So anyway, that's a little bit of background about us. Now, I want to share you a testimony that has come out of all of that. And it happened about 10 years ago. It's actually 2013. My wife and I were living in the Philippines, and I went to sleep one night, and I had a dream. And in the dream, I saw this like tribe of people, and they were all like looking at me, and they were calling out for help. And so I was looking at them. I was actually studying them because I love tribal groups. It's my passion. And so I said, "What tribe are you?" And they responded, "We are the Tinananan tribe." And I was like, Dinananan, I've never heard that word. And then there was a chief of the tribe, and the chief was coming up to the front, and he was carrying a musical instrument. And the musical instrument was about this big around. It was shaped in a circle, and it was like a bowl at the bottom. And then there were strings that went from the outside to the middle of the instrument. And I actually pushed pause on the dream, and I kind of zoomed in, and I studied this instrument. I just kind of watched it, and I looked at it, and I got all the dimensions, the materials. I kind of looked at what scales it was made in, and all the materials and everything, pretty much how to play it and how it sounded and everything. I was pretty fascinated because it was a perfect blend between a harp and a drum. And I've never heard of an instrument like that. So anyway, I zoomed back out, and then the chief put it down, and he began to play it. And as he played this instrument, it was just a beautiful atmosphere of worship that filled the place, and the instrument sounded beautiful, but the whole tribe just kind of responded in worship. And it was as if heaven and earth just collided. It was one of those experiences of heaven and earth coming together. And I woke up after that, and I was like, man, golly, what a dream. So I pulled my journal out, and I just, I wrote that word Dinananan, and then I drew pictures of the instrument, and I put little tags with what materials it was made out of. And actually at that point in my life, I was a missionary. We were doing lots of missions, but there was a deep desire in me to do instrument making. So I kind of put the musician side of me and the craftsman side of me in it, and started my own instrument business. And that's actually what funds us as a family, is my instrument business. But anyway, it was not about funding. It was actually just the interest of this instrument. I was like, wow, I was like, I wonder if I can make it. And so I got in my little tiny makeshift shop in the Philippines. It was like a wooden table with 10 tools. And I said, I'm going to try to make this thing. And I went way up into the mountains of the Philippines, and got all of these materials, and got all this stuff, and brought it back to the shop. And I was like, I'm going to try to put this together. And every time I tried it, I just kept breaking things. I kept snapping things, and it was just it was a fail. And I was like, whoa, this instrument is way over my head. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. So I kind of shelved it, put it to the side, and I researched that word, Dinananan. I looked online. I thought if anybody knows, Google would know, right? So I searched Dinananan on Google, and nothing came up. And I changed the spelling, and nothing came up. And then I decided that I would ask some of my anthropologist friends, because I have a lot of friends who do study of tribal groups around the world, and they said there's no word in our book called Dinananan. There's nothing like that. So I was like, okay, maybe this was just one of those wild pizza dreams, So I was like, okay, all right. So I kind of shelved that. And then about 6 months had passed, and I was on a mission trip out into one of the tribal areas, and I was in the Philippines on this public transportation called the jeepney. And we're going way up into the mountains, and I'm sitting there, and there was this man sitting across the seat for me. And I could tell in my peripheral that he was staring at me. And that's pretty common because, being in the Philippines, being a foreigner, people tend to stare sometimes. But he was really staring at me. And so I was like, I'm just going to talk to this guy. And so I know the national language of the Philippines. It's called Tagalog. And so I know Tagalog. So I began to talk to him in Tagalog. And we were chatting, and it turns out that this man is a believer. And he, as soon as I knew that he was a believer, I said, well, I'm a missionary. And so we started talking about Jesus. And as we're just kind of chatting and talking, I could hear the Lord talk to me. And I just heard the Lord say, hey, Caleb, ask that man about the tinanan. And I was like, no, I don't want to ask this guy about tinanan. But I really heard the Lord say, ask him. So I was like, okay. So I built up the courage, and I just asked the guy. His name was Manigos. So I said, Manigos, do you happen to know tinanan? And when I said that word tinanan, his eyes got really big. And he said, how do you know my people? And I said, what do you mean? He said, how do you know my tribe? And I was like, tell me about your tribe. Like, tell me. I said, and so he told me all about his tribe. Turns out that he is from this mountain range that is it's very hard to get to. It's very cut off from the world. There's actually lots of rebel training groups, rebel army training groups that surround the mountain range, and it makes it really hard to get in and out of this tribal area. And he is from this tribe called the Tinanan tribe. And they are a tribe that was misdocumented in the 80s.
Wow.
And so that's the reason why they are not known in the world. They were misdocumented. So anyway, they're in little pockets, and they're somewhere between 30 and 50,000 people. And so I'm just asking him 1,000 questions about his people. And I say, I have something to show you. So I pulled out my journal, and I showed him all that dream that I had the previous year. And he was reading it, and he started to tear up and cry. And he said, Caleb, he said, remember earlier, before we were talking, I was staring at you. And I was like, yeah, what was that about? And he said, the reason I was staring at you is because I've seen you before. And I was like, no, you haven't seen me before. I've never been to your area. And he said, yes, I've seen you. And it was actually in a dream. It was in a dream 3 years ago. And he said that, all right, so his story is that he was born and raised in the Tinanan tribe. And then he left as a young man, and he went to the city. And he was living in the city, and that's where he came to know Jesus. And when he was in the city, God called him and said, go back to your tribe, because I want you to tell your people about me. And so he went back to the Tinanan people, his people, to tell them about Jesus and to preach the gospel. But every time that he went, or every time that he tried to do it, he just kept encountering lots and lots of persecution. And they refused to listen to him. And so that was when he had this dream. It was 3 years prior to the time that we had met. And in this dream, he saw me come to his tribe, and he and I joined forces to reach the Dinananan people. Yeah. So it was a real powerful moment where Manigos and I, we said, all right, we're stopping everything we're doing, and we're going to pray together. And so we prayed for about 3 days, and we asked the Lord for wisdom. And then I said, okay, I'm going to go with you to your tribe. But before I go, I want to get back in my shop. And I want to try to make this instrument. So I went back to my shop, and this time I was a little bit smarter. I actually asked the Lord for help. I was like, okay, Holy Spirit, help me. And then I was also really smart because I asked my wife to help me. And so Gladys and I, my wife, we worked together with the Holy Spirit, and we made this instrument. And it actually became an actual instrument. And we put the strings on for the first time. I remember putting the strings on, and I stroke it for the first time. There were these little sticks that I saw in the dream that you hit the strings with. And I remember when I started hitting those strings, it was that same sound. It was that same sound. So I was like, whoa, it actually worked. Like from like my geeky side of it, you know, it is actually the same sound. So I felt like I was really ready at that time. So I jumped on a plane. I flew down to the island where he's from. And I asked one of my tribal warrior missionary friends to go with me. And so his name's Ansulau. And so he and I, we got together. We jumped on a little motorbike. It was like a little, 100cc little motorbike. And we jumped on that thing. And I had this instrument with me. And then we got to the bottom of the mountain, and we met Manigos. And so he jumped on the motorbike. So it's 3 of us. And then this large instrument. And we couldn't hold it like this, and we couldn't hold it like this. So the best way to hold it was like above our heads. And we went way up into the mountain, just going up these little rabbit trails. And I could really tell you about 100 wild stories just from that 10 hours of travel going up into the mountain. A storm, a drop-off cliff, a hanging bridge, a wreck. I mean, this it was wild. But for time's sake, yeah, I'll just skip that part. All right, so we got to the island. We got to the tribe, the Dinananan tribe. And just as we were entering in, I was praying, and I heard the Lord say, take the instrument to the chief. So I was like, okay, the chief. So we started asking around, where's the chief of the tribe? And so they said, he's like on the other side, about 3.5 hours away. So we were like, oh, okay, all right. So we went there. We finally got there, and it was kind of in the late afternoon. And we were muddy. We had mud all over us. And we were carrying this musical instrument with us. It was covered up by a little sheet. And then we knocked on his door, the chief of this tribe. We knocked on his door, and he opened it up. And we told him, we said, we are here, for the first time in your tribe. And before we go to different parts of your tribe, we just wanted to give this as a gift to you. And so we just handed it to him. And he brought it in and took the veil off. He took that sheet off. And when he took it off, he leaned in and he said, where did you get this from? And I said, well, I just kind of made it. But he was like, no, seriously, where did you get it from? I said, really, I just had some ideas, and I just kind of put them together and, just kind of made it. And he was like, please tell me, where did you get it from? I said, well, if you really want me to be serious, then I'll tell you the truth. I said, last year I had a dream, and I heard the name of your tribe for the first time. And I also saw this musical instrument that I had never seen before. And I woke up, and turns out that I'm an instrument maker. So I was able to figure out how to make this instrument, and I actually met someone from your tribe. And so I really feel like my God has given me this dream. And it turns out that we were able to come today. And so we just wanted to give it to you. And just at that time, there were some elders from the tribe, and they came in to the room. And when they came into the room, they immediately saw the instrument. And they walked up to it, and they started plucking the strings. And they were saying, Salimbaa, Salimbaa. And they kept talking in their own language, which I did not understand. And they were plucking the string and saying Salimbaa. And so I said, okay, what's Salimbaa? And then the chief said, we have something we want to show you. So they took me down this little path down to the place where they pray and they worship. So it's their house of prayer for their tribe. And this is actually where they worship many different gods, the many different gods of their tribe. And so they took me in there, and they showed me all this whole wall of different musical instruments. And these different musical instruments, they worship different gods of their tribe. But then they have the God of all gods. And they said, we used to have an instrument. This instrument was called the Salimbaa. And it was shaped like a bowl at the bottom, and it had a wooden rim that went all the way around the outside. And it had strings that went from the outside to the middle. And they said this was the instrument that called everybody together to worship the God of all gods. And they said it was taken away from us about 100 or 150 years ago. And they said when it was taken away from us, we knew that one day God would bring it back to us, because there's been a lament, a song that's been passed down through the generations. And that song kind of goes like this. It says something like, the Salimbaa was taken away from us, but one day God is going to bring it back to us. Mm-hmm. And when God brings it back to us, that's actually going to be a sign that God is coming back soon. And because the word Salimbaa in their language means two things. It means the instrument that I just explained to you, but it also means aircraft from heaven. So when you say that word Salimbaa, it means the thing that connects heaven and earth. And they said that God is going to be riding inside the Salimbaa, coming down, and he's going to rest on top of the mountain, and he's going to call all the righteous people to him. That's their story. That's their gospel story. And so he told me that, and we were just blown away. And he said, today you brought the Salimbaa to us. And he said, we want to dedicate this back to God. And so they had this beautiful time of just right there on the spot. They dedicated the instrument to God. They began to play it. And then they called me up, and they handed me, they actually placed a headpiece of a chief on my shoulder. And what that means is they said that we want to honor you as a messenger from God. And that you actually have authority to speak into our council. And they put the headpiece on my shoulder, and they said, we call you Datu, which means chief. That doesn't mean the chief of chief, it means the council of chiefs in their tribe. And so they still to this day call me Datu, and that means that I have a connection and a way of authority to speak into their tribe. And so I said, well, how can I help you guys? And that started a wonderful relationship with this tribe. And they responded by saying, help us translate the Bible in our language. And so we helped them start a Bible translation project in 2015. And then, so we're translating, portions of the scriptures so that they can understand the word, the scriptures. And then we also, the cool thing that is exciting for me is that the door of the gospel has flung wide open. And like I mentioned earlier, we've been able to raise up indigenous missionaries to go into the whole tribe. And they've planted somewhere around 15 churches in the tribe. And so the cool thing is that people are coming to know Jesus. They're being discipled. They're being baptized and discipled and raised up. So, yeah, so it's been quite an amazing journey. And I could tell you 1,000 stories of what the Lord has done there. But how about you go ahead and bring the instrument up? We brought a one that I recently built. The original one is there with the tribe, and we have another one that's in a museum in the Philippines. But this one here that I made is an updated version of it because I kind of travel a lot, and so I like to join worship teams to play this, and so I kind of updated it with gear tuners and stuff like this, but that's pretty much it there. It's the bolt. So what I kind of thought we could do is just kind of enter back into worship, time of worship. And this instrument is called the handpan. This is a newly invented instrument, but it is, if you go back to the history of the Salimbaa, it was also played with a gong-like instrument. And this is the gong-like instrument. So we like to play, these are good partner instruments. So these are the sticks these are kind of fancy sticks that I made, but the original ones were just like bamboo, kind of like long bamboo, bent bamboo. So anyway, how about we just enter into worship? We play a little bit, and then, we can go from there. Well, one thing is that, I just wanted to say this one thing. We're not all called to indigenous tribes way out there, We're not all called to far-flung islands of the Pacific or whatever, but we're all called to something. And I will say this, we're all called to behold the beauty of Jesus.
Yeah.
That is it. And I know, like, one thing that the Lord taught to me from the beginning is never focus on where you're stepping. Always focus on beholding the beauty of Jesus. And when I focus my eyes on the beauty of Jesus, my feet are actually pointed towards him. Because my feet cannot go where my eyes are not. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so my feet are always going to follow where my eyes are. And so I just bless you guys with that. You're called to great things. And